God, I'm so bored. I want to do another collab.
Hey Macca, did you play Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth?
I did!
What did you think of it?
Well, I thought it was right dandy. I'd go as far as to say it was pretty neato.
Do you want to make a call-up on each other's channels about it?
Would I?
Do you?
Would I?
Do you?
Would I?
Do you?
Would I?
Dude, do you want to or not?
Sorry, yes, I would like to do what you said about the collab videos. Before we get started, I just want to clarify that this review will be relatively spoiler-free. Any main story cutscenes you see will be from the first half of the game. However, in order to properly critique the narrative, I will be talking about certain aspects in vague terms so as to not outright spoil everything while still being able to convey my thoughts. There will also be some endgame and post-game footage shown for the sake of variety, though again I made sure it's nothing super spoilery. Lastly, if at some point while watching this video you're like, dang, I really like these guys, why not subscribe to both of us? You're in the right place to subscribe to me, so I'll be leaving a link to Lewis's channel in the top right and in the description below. Now let's get on with the review. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is all about Kasuga Ichiban, leaving behind the colorful streets and disgusting rivers of Ijincho, Yokohama, and heading for Honolulu City, Hawaii, as he searches for his biological mother. However, his plans get upended when he finds she has gone missing, with every criminal organization on the island trying to hunt her down. Hoping to find her first, Ichiban teams up with a little-known character named Kazuma Kiryu, the legendary Dragon of Dojima. From here, our dual protagonists must team up with friends both new and old in order to take on a gang ran by Danny Trejo and a bunch of Latinos, a cult ran by a guy who just speaks with a perfect American accent, and one of the best characters to ever come out of this series. Meanwhile, Kiryu struggles with the choices he's made throughout his life as he now faces his own mortality, having been diagnosed with cancer.
Unsurprisingly, the latest entry in the series, formerly known as Yakuza, continues to be a master of tone. Within minutes, we go from Ichiban explaining that he doesn't care who his real dad is, as the men who raise him will always matter more than bluff, to a scene where his pet crawfish begs him to take her to Hawaii. Follow up by a professor with a massive scar on his face explaining how the dude in a trench coat that flashed them moments ago is actually a Pokemon. While all of this sounds bizarre, and trust me, it is, the series has somehow always been able to make it work. It's amazing how it just goes from these absurd scenarios while not downplaying the serious moments. I am not kidding when I say one of the most emotional moments in the game comes during a sub-story that involves a bunch of grown men wearing diapers. That scene actually made me cry.
Probably the most interesting aspect of Infinite Wealth's story is the various topics and themes explored throughout. Issues such as Hawaiian natives being priced out of their own homeland, the American brand of police corruption, and general colonialism and exploitation is fascinating. I really have to praise Ryuga Gotoku Studios for going out of their way to talk about these things instead of propagating the image of Hawaii as this paradise. If I had to describe the game's main theme in 2 words, however, it would probably be second chances. Allowing those who have screwed up and wronged you in the past the opportunity to atone for their choices while not necessarily forgiving them is a concept a lot of people struggle with if the internet is anything to go by. One thing I especially love is how they illustrate why the marginalized and disenfranchised are willing to turn to crime when society either fails them or refuses to allow them the ability to move on from their past actions. It's also kind of crazy to me that such a big game incorporated a VTuber into the main plot in such a major way. Much like Ichiban's previous outing, he is joined by a solid cast of characters, whether they be old favorites, new favorites, or an old side character being upgraded to main party status. That is also my favorite. Newcomers Tomizawa and Chitose are great additions to the party that each have their own unique personality. While they did take a minute to click for me once I experienced Tomi's drink link, as well as finally getting to know the real Chitose, these two became easy ride or die friends. However, Sonhee blows these two out of the water simply by existing and having the cutest hero idolation-based crush on Kiryu. Her drink links where the two bond over being high-ranking officials of criminal organizations is amazing, and I sincerely hope she becomes a mainstay even if Kiryu isn't involved.
However, for as cool as these playable characters are, all of them pale in comparison to Yukata Yamai. This man is incredible! His deadpan speech, his frozen yet horrifying expression, his cold personality, the way he dresses in multiple layers because he's not warm enough. It's one of those characters that leaves a strong first impression on you, and only gets better and better as you get to know him better. And whether you listen to him in English or Japanese, both voice actors kill it at the role. Honestly, he's probably a top 5 antagonist in the series. He is so good.
The dude loves MILFs. How could you not love him? Now, I hate to say it, but notice how I haven't really talked about the story of Infinite Wealth? While the characters' tones and themes all prove to be amazing, the story is the one area where I feel the game stumbles. It just isn't as tightly written as the 1 in 7. Once the plot splits into the Ichiban and Kiryu plotlines, Ichiban's half ends up feeling bloated and loses focus. There are some plot points that feel like they were added in a second draft because they needed some kind of justification for an action someone took, only to never follow up on it until some random point hours later in a scene that feels like it was added in a third draft. While I praise the interesting themes and social commentary, there's just so much going on that those themes and emotions get lost in the details, and I found myself losing interest from time to time. However, that doesn't mean it completely disappears. There are still plenty of well-written, well-directed scenes that kept me invested and made me feel all sorts of things. It's just they came in between sequences where I found myself struggling to stay engaged. For instance, there is a cult in this game. Like a Dragon is a crime story, and when it talks about the cult as a criminal organization, I think it's fascinating. However, when it talks about the cult as a religious organization, whether it be their beliefs or their internal politics, I struggle to give a shit. Little of what they're saying matters to the crime stuff, and sadly, unlike the other times they talk about Hawaii-specific issues, all of this lore dumping can't be used as a chance to learn about the state's culture because the beliefs the game present are completely made up despite being based on their mythology. Obviously, as a cult, it makes sense to explore these kind of things. It better informs exactly how the leader is manipulating and lying to their followers. The cult's aesthetics gives them a visual identity that makes them stand out from the other groups involved in the plot, making them much more memorable and easier to signal out. A good amount of time is spent building out the lore of these guys, and I understand why. I just don't care. While I understand they didn't want to potentially offend the Hawaiian people, the fact that they go into such detail about made-up mythology that isn't actually relevant to the cult's role in the story results in further bloat. Sure, it's not like they wrote out an entire Bible, but I don't think this much focus was needed to achieve the effect they wanted. On the other hand, so much of why I think Kiryu's plotline is the stronger of the two is because of how simple it feels in comparison and how the game's emotional core almost seems to follow him as he confronts his own mortality. Many of Kiryu's specific side activities are about him reminiscing and getting closure, tying up loose ends, seeing his friends and family one last time, and learning how they truly feel about him. It's so moving, and it brought a tear to my eye multiple times. While his story does tie into the grander narrative, this constant theme explored back in Japan reframes that narrative as being so much more than it otherwise would be. This isn't just another conspiracy for Kiryu to stop. This is his last chance to make a difference, to make up for what he sees as his many mistakes and failures, and to make sure that the world is left in a better place. He sees too much of his own life in what's going on and is trying to help despite having ultimately no real stake in the matter. And while I'm not trying to knock Ichiban, a lot of his motivation is based around the fact that his mom, who he's never met before, is involved and because it's the right thing to do. It's not a bad reason, it just feels underutilized and underdeveloped when compared to Kiryu. There comes a point where Ichiban is having a conversation with someone about how they haven't actually gotten a chance to just talk, leading to this incredible scene that gave me genuine chills. Yet, it's in that quote the problem lies. There's just so much going on that the game sometimes loses itself in the weeds. Ichiban wanting to meet and save his mom makes sense, but for too long, the game doesn't really do anything more with that would evolve his character. He remains so much more static despite his half of the story having so much more going on that should have an effect, yet doesn't. Meanwhile, almost from the second the story splits off, the reasons for Kiryu's actions just keep intensifying as he looks back on his life and continues to fight. If anything, he has the better motivation for his involvement, despite having less of a connection to this case otherwise. While I can't speak for someone who hasn't played Kiryu's games and is only familiar with Ichiban, for me it feels as though the emotional through line almost leaves with Kiryu. Sure, there are plenty of scenes in Ichiban's half of the game that are fantastic, but the connection between those scenes is so much weaker. It makes these scenes feel more like individual bursts of emotions, while Kiryu's equivalent scenes feel like the culmination of this feeling that's been building in your chest for hours. The narrative never feels like it favors one protagonist over the other, but the writing absolutely does.
Personally, I like the story of Infinite Wealth, but as Macca said, the characters and Kiryu's arc pretty much carry it the whole way through. I like the overall narrative, but as you just saw, there's some notable flaws here and there. The one that stuck with me the most is that by the end of the adventure, the game leaves many things open and or unexplained. I personally enjoyed the ending of the game, but after the credits, I found myself asking a lot of questions like, what happened to these characters? What about this thing? What about that? How did this character get here so fast? Overall, I still had a fun time with the story, I found it to be good, but once you finish the game, many of its cracks start to show up.
Okay, now that the complaining is over, time for basically nothing but endless praise. As a game, Infinite Wealth blows the previous entry out of the water, refining the combat and including an insane amount of varied content that is polished to a sheen. Easily, the biggest and best change to combat is the ability to move your character within a given space during their turn, instantly fixing my biggest issue with 7's combat. There are so many factors at play during any encounter. Even just the standard attack option has a bunch of things to account for. Your proximity to your target. Is your target downed? Are you close enough to an ally to perform a combo attack? Are you close enough to an object that you can pick up and use as a weapon? Where are the other enemies in relation to your target? Etc, etc, etc. Your character's placement matters immensely. So finally being able to control where they are is so freeing, and it opens up so many strategic options. However, one thing I do wish they could streamline is item management. Having a million different types of healing items is fine, but the problem is having to search through everything for the one you want. It's so messy and it takes way longer than it should, just so I don't end up wasting a super good item. I also wish the auto-recover used items as opposed to MP. Have it use the items with the smallest replenishments first as opposed to the most. That way you're naturally clearing out your inventory while not wasting your best items and wasting your time. Infinite Wealth's job system has been relatively untouched in the years since Ichiban's last adventure, though there are a few key changes. Of course, there's the addition of a bunch of new jobs that range from fine to utterly perfect. My favorites are easily Tennis Ace and Dragon of Dojima. While the former doesn't have the most versatility, its insane amount of damage output and area coverage more than makes up for it. As for Dragon of Dojima, it's definitely the most complex job in the game. Featuring Kiryu's 3 classic combat styles, Rush, Brawler, and Beast, you can switch between them at any time, each serving a specific purpose. While I would love to go into greater detail on these jobs and what makes them so great, we actually already did that in a tier list we made over on the Game Shelf's channel. Link is in the top right and in the description, so go give it a watch after you finish up here. Please, I need the ad revenue. I got loan sharks I gotta pay back.
And I have to pay rent and I can find a second job. Anyway, personally, one of my favorite parts about the job system is how they revamp skill inheritance. In the previous game, you could acquire certain skills after leveling up jobs and use them in other classes. but you could only inherit the skills the game decided you could inherit. It was extremely limited. But luckily, Infinite Wealth allows you to inherit any skill you want with almost no restrictions. I love this so much because it doesn't just give you more flexibility in building your characters, it motivates you and rewards you for swapping classes, whereas in the previous game it felt like a punishment to try a new job. It was one of the best changes they could have made.
Beyond the core gameplay comes a bunch of minigames and side activities, and pretty much across the board they are all excellent. I have half a mind to say that this might be the best selection of optional content in the series. Of course, we have karaoke, an all-time classic that this time has an insane number of tracks to play. Drink links and the bond system return from 7 as well and are just as great as ever. Though I love the new bond bingo boards, filling these things out is so satisfying, especially when you get 3 bingos in one go.
And on top of bingo cards, you have party conversations spread all over the map and even table talks where most of your party members can participate. It is so cool because you get the best of both worlds. With bingo cards, you can get to know a specific character better, and with party conversations and table talks, you see them interact with one another and enjoy their fantastic chemistry. Aloha Links is a whole Facebook system with random NPCs that rewards you for simply saying hello to people. While photo rallies are a great way to help familiarize the player with the environment, burning the layout in your mind so you don't necessarily need to use the map all the time. There's also a Tinder-based minigame which can reward you with feedbacks that is just... It's definitely one of the Yakuza minigames of all time.
Probably the 2 best new minigames are Sicko Snap and Crazy Delivery. Sicko Snap is an incredibly fun Pokemon Snap-esque minigame where you have to be quick on your toes to snap the best shots of a bunch of sickos littering the streets of Hawaii, while Crazy Delivery is a strange mix of DoorDash, Crazy Taxi, and Looney Tunes that work super well. Finally, we have the 2 big side modes of the game, Sujimon and Dondoko Island. These are 2 sizable modes that use infinite wealth as a basis to create drastically different experiences. Sujimon has you collecting and training Sujimon so you can take on other Sujimon trainers and aim to defeat the Sujimon Discrete 4. A clear riff on Pokemon and other monster collecting games, this system is a lot of fun and I wish I had spent more time with it. It's so fun teaming up with these freaks of nature in a story that aims to parody the hell out of Pokemon. As for Dondoko Island, I spent 2 days straight doing nothing but this Animal Crossing clone, and by the time I finished and returned to the real game, everything was alien to me. It was wrong. It felt weird. While a lot of people have compared this mode to Animal Crossing, it's actually more of a mix between that and Roller Coaster Tycoon. Moment-to-moment gameplay is like Animal Crossing. Running around, collecting resources, going spearfishing, crafting items and furniture, accruing money, getting your Sujimon to slave away in the Sweai workshop, fighting off pirates, and saying hello to your guests. Meanwhile, your overall goal is to keep your guests happy and decorate the island with enough things to do to keep them entertained and keep them spending money. The happier they are, the more money they spend, and the more money you make. Your goal is to become a 5-star resort, but as you work your way towards it, you'll have to deal with a gang of pirates who just want to use your resort as a dump for their trash. This mode is so addictive and is probably the most fleshed out side mode in any Yakuza game. Like, I genuinely think you could take this framework and turn it into a full standalone experience. My only complaint is with combat. On Dondoko Island, combat is more akin to the classic beat-em-up style of past games. However, this time it feels incredibly clunky, reminding me too much of the original PS2 games in a bad way. You can upgrade your bat to improve your swing speed, but at no point does it ever feel right. Side note, Gachapin and Muku are real and they tried to suck my dick. They're 50-year-old characters created for a 1970s kids show and now they get licensed out to anyone who wants to use them. They even have a YouTube channel where they play Dondoko Island. Sure, Gachapin and Muku are cool, but they ain't got nothing on Onomichio. Bro is such a top-tier mascot that he's taken the world by storm. Hawaii is obsessed with him. People want to be him. Humanity attempts and fails to recreate him in a foolish attempt to put themselves on God's level. Hell, even the most famous American characters are copying him in a pathetic attempt to be 0.1% as iconic.
Personally though, I am more of a Camulop fan. Remember when a bunch of them attacked you in Lost Judgment claiming that the era of the hentai was about to begin? That made them just as memorable as Sonomichio.
Now, let's talk about audio, cause there's actually a lot to talk about. Not necessarily for the reason you think, but I'll be talking about that as well. First off, the music in Infinite Wealth is shockingly good. I know I shouldn't be, because the last few RGG Studio games have had great music, but this game feels like a massive step up for me. I raised the volume on my TV so many times just so I could jam out to some truly god-tier tracks. Playing in Japanese feels more warranted than ever because the language barrier is genuinely a constant while in Hawaii. Tons of English is spoken, but it's not exactly good. All the nameless NPCs and random grunts are not well acted in English, and honestly remind me a lot of the English dubs of old Japanese games from the PS1 to PS2 era. You know, the era where it feels like they went out onto the street and grabbed the first person with an American accent they heard? Actually, you know what? I'm gonna make one exception to this. There is one scene about like 4 chapters into the game in which you run into a Barracuda grunt, and he actually sounded pretty okay from what I remember. On the other side of the coin, normally I'd let it slide, but the fact that the main characters who are supposed to be native to Hawaii still speak English with a heavy Japanese accent actually does bug me. It rips me out of the moment. In literally any other game in this series, this wouldn't be an issue, but it's the fact that this is the one game that literally takes place in a country known for speaking English. I understand the actors are Japanese natives who were hired based on acting ability, as well as how famous they are, but it just feels weird that the American who grew up on English-speaking islands, who has some Japanese blood in them, doesn't talk how they reasonably should.
Officer, help! I'm being robbed!
One character, Bryce Fairchild, is by every metric possible a fucking white dude. He's American through and through and easily speaks the most English out of everyone in the cast. However, despite this, he's played by Japanese actor Toru Furuya, aka the guy who played the main character in the original Mobile Suit Gundam. With how much Japan celebrates and respects their voice actors, clearly he is a massive get in a similar fashion to how the English dub has Daniel Day Kim and Danny Trejo. Unlike Dr. Han and Machete, Furuya cannot speak English without one of the heaviest Japanese accents I've ever heard, and it sounds like he's simply reading off lines phonetically while having no idea what he's saying. It results in a character who is ostensibly the most stereotypical American in the cast, being the hardest character for me, an English-speaking American, to believe is an American. But let's be real, Japan was not thinking about me when casting this game. This isn't me saying RGG Studios should have factored me and people like me into the equation when casting for the Japanese audio track. This is just me saying now more than ever, I felt like the English actually took away from the experience to a degree. It's hard to take Bryce seriously when he sounds like this.
Rejoice, for Madame Nelly has extended her divine protection to you and your humble establishment.
It's times like this I really wish there was a way to import the English dub lines for the times characters are canonically speaking English while retaining the Japanese audio for the times characters canonically speak Japanese. There's already a Yong Out mod to replace Kiryu's dub lines with Takaya Kuroda, so why not go the full mile and make a full immersion mod that also allows for good English voice acting when called for? Hell, someone made one of those for the demo that was in Gaiden, so bring it over and do it for the full game, please. I would love that.
Since I actually really love English Yakuza dubs, I was asked to address the elephant in the room, Yongyea as Kiryu. You all saw the criticism, all the controversies about the casting, and even those awful clips of
Justice, we're breaking the law, breaking the world together.
When Yongyea was revealed to be the new English voice for Kiryu, many people didn't take that very good. But can I be honest with you? Yongyea doesn't actually give a horrible performance, it's just he was horribly miscast, and I don't think his direction was very good. If I am honest, I actually made use of the Young Out mod to replace him with Takaya Kuroda, but it isn't fully Yongyea's fault. A voice actor can be very passionate about the role they're playing, but it won't matter much in the end if their direction is bad and the character they're playing does not fit them at all. In fact, he has voiced other characters in the series and they were honestly pretty good. Shirakawa from the Kaito Files is an example of that. The Yakuza series and English dubs have a complicated history. While the first game was dubbed into English, the poor sales of it led Sega dropping English dubs until long after the series actually started to see success in Western markets. It wasn't until 2019's Judgment that we finally get to hear English come out of the main characters. That has been an option for the players ever since. Except for Ishin.
As a fan of the series who has played every game to come out in the West, I'm far more used to the Japanese voices and would feel weird to just suddenly be able to understand everybody without the use of subtitles. The Japanese language is part of the experience for me, and it's precisely because of the franchise's relationship with dubs that made it this way. When I think of Majima, I don't hear Mark Hamill. I don't hear Matt Mercer. I hear Hidenari Ugaki. Similarly, when I think of Kiryu, I hear Takaya Kuroda. He's the one who has shaped this character in the minds of fans worldwide, and as a result, it's incredibly hard to translate that into English. There's a history behind that voice that conveys all the struggles and hardships Kiryu has been through, as well as all of the love and caring he has for his friends and family. All of this has come naturally as a result of the almost 2 decades spent playing the character and molding his story. To try and convey this same sense of experience and prestige in English is a Herculean task that cannot be done perfectly. The closest you can get is with the actor who played Kiryu all the way back on the PS2, Daryl Kurlow. While he wouldn't have the same level of familiarity as Kuroda, he's still shown himself to be fully capable at conveying the gruffness that is integral to the character, especially with Yakuza 7's much better voice direction when compared to the original games. But as we all know, they went in a different direction for Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, with Kazuma Kiryu now being played by Yongyea. There is the question of why Sega of America decided on the recast. While I have my own personal theories, I feel like this is frankly irrelevant to this specific discussion. What matters is that Daryl is out, Yong is in. But that hasn't stopped people from theorizing. I've seen people claim it's because they wanted to use Yong's YouTube clout to market the game, and guys, this is Yong fucking yeah. He's a goddamn video game news channel. Do you really think Sega would look at him and go, oh yeah, that guy has a mega dedicated, ultra massive fan base that we can use to market the game with? In a game with Danny Trejo and Daniel Day Kim playing major characters, they thought this fucking YouTuber was the one to try and market the game with? The game that got fucking Drewski to be in its marketing? I mean, no disrespect to Yong, but the fucking VTuber that got in via a contest has more marketability than him. Do you know how many people I saw hyped for Kason to be in the game? It was a lot! Yong wasn't cast because he's a YouTuber. He was cast because he is a voice actor. Because the casting director thought he was the right fit for the role. Whether you agree with Yong's comment about earning the character or not, the fact of the matter is that someone working on the game thought, yes, this is our Kiryu. And it's that decision I take issue with. Yongyea is still relatively early in his voice acting career. As someone who occasionally watches his channel, I remember when he first talked about moving out to LA to get into voice acting. While his resume isn't huge, he's more than well acquainted with the process and has been in quite a few productions. Prior to Kiryu, his most notable role would easily be Enrico Pucci, the main villain of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 6, Stone Ocean. I remember people praising the dub when it was coming out, with many people surprised to find how good a job Yong was doing as Pucci. He is a good voice actor in many people's eyes, and from having listened to his Kiryu, I think he's giving a good performance. It's just not the right performance for Kiryu. None of the experience is there. None of that specific mix of pain and love is there. None of that familiarity is there. It's just a complete and total miscast. If this was a brand new character that Yang was helping establish, then maybe he would be the right fit.
In fact, we got the perfect example right next to Kiryu, with Kaiji Tank as Ichiban, and the results speak for themselves. An absolutely phenomenal performance that is continuing to evolve in Infinite Wealth, and will hopefully reach the same level of iconicness and prestige as Kuroda, as Kaiji further builds and explores the character and his story alongside RGG Studios. But this isn't what Yongyea got. He came in during the third climax of a beloved character story and was expected to replicate in one game what was created over the course of 16.
10 original stories with Kazuma Kiryu as a main character. 2 games about characters who are Kiryu in everything but name. 3 remakes where the performance was refined by Kuroda's improved acting skills and redefined by Kiryu's expanded character. And 1 game where Kiryu passes the torch to a new protagonist. There's a difference between a bad performance and bad casting. Yang was given an impossible task, and while I think he's doing the best he can, I just don't think he was the right man for the job.
By the end of the day, even if the story fell a bit short from what we were expecting and we had some minor nitpicks here and there, Infinite Wealth is easily one of the best games in the franchise, just for the sole fact that it improves tremendously on the previous game. I said this in my own review, which you're also welcome to check, by the way, just saying. This is a game so good that gameplay-wise, it makes its predecessor seem like a bad game, and I don't mean to make Like a Dragon any less, it's still an amazing title. But Infinite Wealth does so many things better, it's gonna be hard to return to the combat of 7.
For me, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is one of the best Yakuza games. As a game, it blows the 7th entry out of the water with vastly improved combat, a plethora of amazing side content, and one of the best new maps in the series. However, its story suffers from bloat, resulting in Ichiban's story losing itself. Thankfully, a lot of these issues are made up for by some incredible scenes and the simplicity and focus of Kiryu's half. But the end product still ends up feeling unbalanced. I don't know where they'll be taking this series next, but what I do know is that it will continue to be some of the best games to have ever come out of Sega. Hopefully, we won't have to wait too long before we get to see Ichiban and friends again, because the feeling of catching up with them in the beginning of the game had me smiling more than I could even imagine. Well, this was supposed to be a collab, but I feel like I talked for like 70% of it. Sorry, I had a lot to say. Anyway, now that we're done here, why not head over to the game shelf to check out our second collab? Link is in the description below, as well as in the top right, like I said before. Like I also said before, why not subscribe and hit the bell for both of us so you can know exactly when our new videos are out.
Thank you so much for inviting me, man, but what are you gonna do about the loan sharks?
What? Yeah, you should leave out the back.
Run.